Hello and welcome back to Bicyclelegs and another edition of Anniversary Albums. Today we're going to be looking at albums that are having a significant anniversary in the month of July 2023. For those new to this series, when I say a significant anniversary, I'm talking about one that ends in a 5 or a 0. So 50th, 40th, 25th, 35th, that sort of thing. You'll get the hang of it as we go along. Again, as usual, I've picked out 10 albums to have a look at. We're going to start with one that's having its 40th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 4th of July 1983. It is the second and final album by this band, and that is You and Me Both by Yazoo, also known as Yaz in the United States. Great album. Maybe not quite as good as Upstairs as Eric, but I still think it's a marvelous album. Nobody's Diary. What a great single that is. I mean, you've got Walk Away from Love, you've got Softly Over, Sweet Thing, Ode to Boy, Happy People, and on. Just so many great songs. Really good synth pop, but, you know, this is not your typical frothy, bubbly synth pop. This has definitely got some substance to it, as far as I'm concerned. Not that I have a problem with bubbly synth pop. I think bubbly synth pop's great, but I don't think you can really call this that. I think this definitely has more depth and feeling to it. The next album we're going to have a look at is also the second album by a particular band. It is having its 35th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 5th of July 1988, and that is Temple of Lowmen by Crowded House. A step up from the debut, even though the debut is a wonderful album. I love this album. It's got a slightly darker hue than the first album does. There's so many good songs on this. I mean, the big hit off this was Better Be Home Soon, which is still sort of one of Crowded House's most beloved songs. But you've got I Feel Possessed, which I think is wonderful. Kill Eye. Great song. Into Temptation, beautiful with those Chamberlain keyboards, which are kind of like a Mellotron, but not quite. Mansion in the Slums, When You Come was a great single too. Not such a big hit though. Never Be the Same leads off side 2, which is a really great sort of up-tempo song. Love This Life is beautiful. Sister Madly's a lot of fun. In the Lowlands. Yeah, it's just a wonderful album. Really great. And they would just get better and better from this point on. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 50th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 13th of July 1973. It's a much misunderstood album by this band, I think, but an album that I absolutely adore, and that is A Passion Play by Jethro Tull. Now, I can't really go through a track listing of this one because it's really just one big long track that's, you know, sort of much like Thick as a Brick was. But this album didn't get the love that Thick as a Brick did. In fact, it got pretty badly panned by the critics at the time. Even though it went well on the charts, it was a controversial album, but I think it's a wonderful album. I actually avoided this album when I was first getting into Jethro Tull because I'd heard so many bad things about it. And I remember being on a work trip to Melbourne and finally picking up a cheap copy of this on CD and listening to it in my hotel room and just falling in love with it instantly. I think it's an absolutely brilliant album. Something that I may even do an in defense of at some stage. I've already done an in defense of a Tull album, but this one is definitely something that I think deserves more love than it gets. Now, the next album we're going to have a look at is a debut album. It was released exactly the same day as A Passion Play, so it's also having its 50th anniversary in July, released on the 13th of June 1973, and that is the self-titled debut by Queen. What a great debut album this is. Keep Yourself Alive. What a great way to announce yourself to the world. Going All Right's beautiful. Great King Rat. Hello, Grace. My cat, Grace, making an appearance. Great King Rat, My Fairy King. You know, Modern times rock and roll. It's like Roger Taylor doing a vocal and writing the song, and I really love that. Jesus, son and daughter, and you get a little snatch of the Seven Seas of Rye that would become like a fully fleshed out song on the second album. It's a wonderful debut album. I think Queen would do better albums than this. Obviously, this is not the greatest Queen album, but it is a wonderful Queen album. Really, really love it. And John Deacon, for some reason, credited as Deacon John. I don't know. The next album we're going to have a look at is another second album by a band. It's having its 45th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 14th of July 1978, and that is More Songs About Buildings and Food by Talking Heads. This is the first of 3 albums that Talking Heads would be produced by Brian Eno. Wonderful album. I've done a Talking Heads studio albums ranking. I'll leave a link for that in the description, as well as my Crowded House studio albums ranks, because I've done one of those as well. This is just a fabulous album start to finish. Thank You for Sending Me an Angel, With Our Love, The Good Thing, Warning Sign. What a great song that is. The Girls Want to Be with the Girls. Found a Job. I always love that song. The version they do of that on the Stop Making Sense movie is just absolutely outstanding too. Then you get Artists Only and Stay Hungry, which are like very early songs. They were sort of even before the first album. Very early Talking Heads songs. You've got I'm Not in Love, Take Me to the River. That was sort of the song that first got them noticed. It was the first one that got some singles chart action, and then The Big Country. Just a fabulous album. Now the next album we're going to have a look at is actually a live album. I don't do a lot of live albums in these anniversary album shows, but I think this one's notable. It's having its 50th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 20th of July 1973, and that is Genesis Live. Coming out in between Foxtrot and Selling England by the Pound. The band weren't so keen on having this album released, but I think it's a wonderful live album. You get some really killer versions of the songs that are on here. Watcher of the Skies, one of the all-time great album and concert openers, I think, that song. Get 'Em Out by Friday. The Return of the Giant Hogweed, always one of my favourite songs off Nursery Crime. And then The Musical Box, which is my favourite song off Nursery Crime. And then an absolutely scintillating version of The Knife from Trespass. Great. I would love to have seen this be a double. They did around this time record a live version of Supper's Ready. And I would have loved to have heard that on this album too. Now, the next album we're going to have a look at is having its 40th anniversary in the month of July. It's hard to believe that this band has been going for over 40 years. It's a debut album again, originally released on the 25th of July 1983, and that is Kill 'Em All by Metallica. Now, I only recently picked up a vinyl copy of this. I did a show on Peter Kerr's Rock Daydream Nation. I'll leave a link to it in the description, where we set out to do a cheap album challenge. And although this wasn't part of that, I did get this album for a surprisingly low price, and we talk about that in that show. So I'll leave a link in the description for that. But what a killer debut album. I mean, Hit the Lights, again, Keep Yourself Alive. It's just a band announcing itself right from the get-go. You got the Four Horsemen, Motor Breath, Jump in the Fire. Funnily, I mentioned this in the show that I did with Peter. On the label of this version, this is 1987 Elektra pressing, Australian pressing. And on the label, it's mispressed. Jump in the Fire is listed as Jump in the Air. So many great songs. No Remorse, Seek and Destroy, Metal Militia. I mean, another, absolutely great classic song. So many great songs on this album. Now the next album we're going to have a look at is having its 55th anniversary in the month of July. It's the oldest one we'll be looking at this month. It was originally released on the 26th of July 1968. It's another, well, it's actually the third album by this band, but it's the second album by what most people consider to be the definitive lineup of this band. It is In Search of the Lost Chord by the Moody Blues. It's a great album. It doesn't have the orchestra the way that Days of Future Past did. It relies much more on the mellotron, although there's plenty of mellotron on Days of Future Past as well. They only use mellotron, they don't really use strings on this album. So it's slightly different. It's definitely got that hippie, psychedelic feel to it. I've always argued that the Moody Blues were never really a prog band. I know I get a lot of pushback on that. I think they were a band that led to progressive rock, but I never really thought of them as a progressive rock band in and of themselves. But really great sort of psychedelic hippie music. You know, Ride My Seesaw was the single off this album. You know, you've got Dr. Livingston, I presume. You've got The Word, Voices in the Sky, The Best Way to Travel, The Actor. I love the fact that all of the band members write songs and most of them sing. So you get a lot of variety on these early Moody Blues albums. Really lovely stuff. Love it. Now the last two albums we're going to look at, I'm going to go a little bit different from what I normally do. I don't normally choose albums that I know what month they were released in, but I don't have an exact date. These two I don't have an exact date for. They were released in July of 1973, so they're both having 50th anniversaries in the month of July. But I felt that they were such, you know, wonderful albums that I had to include them. We're going to look at another second album. It's been a bit of a theme this month, hasn't it? Released in July 1973, and that is Countdown to Ecstasy by Steely Dan. A wonderful follow-up to Can't Buy a Thrill, which was the debut album. Maybe not quite as great. I mean, it certainly didn't do as well charts-wise, but I think there's some wonderful songs on here. Bodhisattva, Razor Boy, The Boston Rag's great. Showbiz Kids. You know, they released that as a single, and it's an interesting song to have as a single. But it didn't do very well, unfortunately. My Old School, Pearl of the Quarter, King of the World. It's a wonderful early Steely Dan album, absolutely wonderful. And then the last album we're going to have a look at today, please excuse my cat meowing in the background. She's kind of going crazy tonight. The last album is a debut album, released in July of 1973, so having its 50th anniversary, and it is the self-titled debut by 10cc. Here in Australia, as you can see on the cover there, it was actually titled Rubber Bullets, but in most of the rest of the world it was just called 10cc. Obviously Rubber Bullets was a big hit off it, but also Donna was a huge hit for them. You got Johnny Don't Do It, which is, again, like Donna, had that sort of wonderful sort of satirical doo-wop kind of song with Lol Cream doing these really high vocals. Sand in My Face, Speed Kills, The Dean and I, Ships Don't Disappear in the Night, Do They? You know, wonderful songs. Fresh Air for My Mama is a beautiful song. The Hospital song is hilarious. Headline Hustle is really great. Would sort of point away towards what 10cc would sound like on the next sort of 2 or 3 albums. Wonderful band. I definitely need to do a video going more in depth into 10cc on this channel, because they're one of the bands I absolutely love. So there you have it, everyone. Those are my 10 anniversary albums for the month of July 2023. Please let me know in the comments which of these you love, which ones maybe you don't care for so much. Please let me know which ones you think I should have included that I missed, because I always love seeing those. Sometimes they're things that were on my longer list that I just chose to leave out. Sometimes they're things that I just didn't even think of. And I absolutely love it when you bring those ones to my attention, because even though I might kick myself, it makes me go and listen to those albums. So please let me know in the comments. I really love those comments. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you go to the playlists tab on my page, you'll find that there's a playlist for my anniversary albums, for example. So if you want to see some of my other shows of anniversary albums, you can do that. If you want to look at my studio albums ranked shows, there's a playlist for those. If you want to have a look at some of my appearances on other people's channels, like Rock Daydream Nation, there's a playlist for those, and so on and so on. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter. And I also have a dedicated Facebook page for Bicycle Legs. Links are all in the description, so please come and check those out. Give them a like and join in the conversation. I would love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.